I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like, until I walked into my own bedroom and found my wife with another man. That moment shattered everything I believed in, but it also set me on a path I never saw coming. I was 2 shots into a bottle of Jack Daniels, trying to take the edge off what was shaping up to be a rough weekend, and it wasn't even 3 in the afternoon yet. I work as a reporter for a small-town newspaper in the Midwest, and after putting in several late nights on assignment, my boss had cut me some slack and given me Friday afternoon off as comp time. After running a few errands, I headed home, looking forward to sinking into my favorite lazy boy for a well-deserved nap. But as I pulled into my driveway, something felt off. There were 2 cars parked there. One was my wife's, Megan's, a familiar sight since we'd been married for 7 years, but the other car was a complete mystery. It struck me as odd that Megan was home in the middle of the day since she worked as an actuary at a mid-sized insurance company and usually kept an 8 to 5 schedule. I couldn't place the second car, but I didn't think too much of it right away. I trusted Megan completely. Ours was a marriage I'd always thought of as rock solid. Still, curiosity got the better of me as I unlocked the front door. The moment I stepped inside, though, my world flipped upside down. From the direction of our bedroom upstairs came unmistakable sounds. 2 people fully caught up in each other, making no effort to keep it quiet. Clearly, the door was open since they didn't seem to be expecting anyone else to show up. I could hear moans and shouts echoing through the house. Feeling my heart pound, I took the stairs 2 at a time, carpet muffling my steps. As I got closer to the bedroom, the sounds grew louder, more distinct. I heard a deep voice, a man's voice I didn't recognize, grunting out words that hit me like a punch to the gut. "This what you wanted? This what your husband's not giving you?" My wife was groaning even louder in response, clearly wrapped up in the moment with this guy who sounded like he could have been a linebacker. My legs felt like they might give out beneath me, but I pushed forward until I reached the doorway. There, sprawled on our bed, was Megan, my beautiful wife, beneath a man who looked like he could bench press a car. The way he was moving, it was clear he was giving her everything he had. For a split second, I froze, barely able to process what I was seeing and hearing. Megan had never once indicated that she felt unfulfilled with me, but in that moment, I couldn't help but feel like I was somehow coming up short. A wave of nausea swept over me as my mind struggled to catch up with reality. My life was unraveling right in front of my eyes. I couldn't just stand there, so I forced myself to speak, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't mind me," I shouted, stepping into the room. I headed straight for the closet, yanked open the door and pulled out my gym bag. I didn't bother looking at them again as I started stuffing a few changes of clothes into it. It was only when Megan finally noticed me that things really started to change. Megan froze the moment she saw me, pushing the guy off of her just enough to look my way. "Oh, Simon. I'm so sorry you had to see this," she shouted from beneath the massive guy, her face contorted with shock and guilt. "We were going to tell you, not like this. Not this way." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Oh really? And exactly when was that supposed to happen, Trace?" I shot back, unable to hide the sarcasm. "Were you planning on telling me on our 10th anniversary? Because from the looks of it, this isn't just a one-time thing. You could have found a minute to let me know, if you actually cared." The guy, still hovering over her, had finally stopped his movements, but he stayed put as Megan tried to shift around and look at me, her face twisted in embarrassment. I couldn't bear to look at either of them anymore. "Never mind, Megan. I'll just grab a few things and be out of your hair. I'll come by later for anything else I might need. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers." I shook my head, barely able to contain my anger. "By the way, who's this caveman you've got on top of you?" Megan actually had the nerve to giggle. "That's kind of funny," she said, clearly uncomfortable. "Simon, this is Derek, my attorney. He works for one of the big firms downtown." "Perfect," I muttered, not even bothering to look back as I stuffed the last of my clothes into my bag. I didn't even take the time to shut the door on my way out. I just threw my things into my Ford F-150 and drove straight to the only place I could think of, the Rusty Fork, my go-to bar. It definitely wasn't the kind of weekend I'd planned. The place was nearly deserted. It was a Friday afternoon after all, and the familiar quiet felt oddly comforting. Noel, my favorite bartender, wouldn't even be starting his shift until 4, so I just slid into my usual spot at the bar and let my mind wander. I couldn't help but think back to the last work event I'd attended with Megan. The vibe had been off. Her coworkers didn't bother hiding how little they thought of me, and near the end of the night, even Megan seemed to be echoing their attitude. I remember how she couldn't help but mention how her job paid twice what mine did, and it stung. On the drive home, we'd had a heated conversation about how she was acting, but she just shrugged it off as being tipsy. I wasn't happy with that excuse, but I'm not one to hold a grudge. A few days later things seemed back to normal, or at least that's what I let myself believe. Now, sitting at the bar, I knew I should probably be taking care of practical things, like moving half of our joint money into an account with just my name on it. But at that moment I couldn't bring myself to care. My credit card was in my name and that was enough for now. I figured I could just spend the evening drinking myself into oblivion and crash in my truck when I was too drunk to stand. I figured I'd find a hotel or maybe an apartment to rent tomorrow. My mind was too scrambled to think about it right now. Megan and I met at a big Midwestern university. We started dating during our junior year and kept going through our senior year. Eventually I proposed, and we both knew that unless I landed a job at a major newspaper in a big city, she'd probably always out-earn me. We had talked about it, though, and we agreed that whatever money we made would be ours, shared, not mine or hers separately. At least, that's how I thought it was supposed to be. Lately, though, it seemed like Megan had completely forgotten that agreement. I couldn't help but wonder how much of her attitude had changed because of her coworkers' opinions, but one thing was clear: she'd lost all respect for me. And as for love? Today made it painfully obvious just how little of that was left. Around 4 p.m., Noel finally came on shift, looking a bit surprised to see me there so early. After a quick greeting, I gave him the short version of my day and then handed him the keys to my truck. "Do me a favor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "When I'm done drinking myself senseless, just pour me into the cab. But whatever you do, don't give me those keys back until I wake up tomorrow." Noel gave me a sympathetic nod. "That's rough, man. Finding out like that. I can't even imagine." By the time 9 p.m. rolled around, I was so far gone I couldn't feel much of anything. Not pain, not even my hands or feet. That's when a state trooper walked in, looking like he'd been on a mission to find me for hours. One of the regulars must have tipped him off that I was here. I slammed my drink down and let out a sarcastic cheer. "Well, look at that. Drinks are on me. Turns out there's a God in heaven." The trooper, Reginald Masters, looked like he'd just seen a ghost. I don't think he was expecting me to be so upbeat. "Sir, I get that you're in shock," he started, but I cut him off, my voice slurring with every word. "Shock? Try pure joy, buddy. You wouldn't believe my day. I caught my wife getting it on with some muscle-bound dude in my bed this afternoon." Masters hesitated, clearly trying to find the right words. "Sir, I'm really sorry, but there's been an accident. Your wife and another man were killed in a car crash about an hour ago." It took me a second to process what he said. My brain felt foggy, but slowly the words sank in. "Megan, dead?" My first reaction wasn't what I would have expected. Instead of grief, I felt a strange, hollow relief. "Wow," I whispered, shaking my head. "A convertible flipped. Guess that'll do it." The trooper must have thought I'd lost my mind. "I understand this must be hard to process," he said cautiously. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Hard? I don't even know what to feel. I guess I'd like to see the bodies." When we arrived at the scene, I felt numb. Megan was still in the car, partially covered but recognizable. Derek too. I tried to summon some kind of sadness, but all I could think about was the last image of her, begging that guy to give it to her right there in our bed. When I finally got back home, I knew I had to make a few calls, to my parents, her parents, and her sister, Anna. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew I should feel something deeper than this odd emptiness, but the only thing replaying in my head was Megan urging Derek on. It didn't matter that she was gone, I couldn't shake that image. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my trance. A friend who had heard about the accident asked, "Simon, are you sure Megan was cheating on you?" I just stared at the screen, my mind still struggling to catch up with everything that had happened. "This isn't something you want to go telling people if you're not absolutely sure," my dad said cautiously, his voice low and serious. I cut him off, not bothering to soften my tone. "Dad, I know what I saw. I caught them in the act. Trust me, I've had sex enough times to know what it looks like." He hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. "Have you talked to Ron and Cindy yet? What are you planning to tell them?" I sighed, rubbing my temples as the reality of it all started sinking in. As little as possible. I'm not in the mood to get grilled by them, or anyone else for that matter. It's not like I can just pretend she wasn't my wife, but this definitely saves me from having to force myself to say something nice about her. I paused, trying to find the right words. She won't be buried in my family's plot. No way. I sure don't want to spend eternity lying next to her when my time comes. Just give me the name of the funeral home your family uses, and I'll make sure her body is taken there. I'll cover that part and you and Cindy can figure out the rest. As for the viewing, I'm not going to be there. No chance. Ron's voice was firm, trying to reason with me. You can't just act like she didn't matter, Simon. She was a big part of your life. My anger flared and I snapped back. Oh, come on, Ron. Don't pretend you didn't know something was up. If I was such a terrible guy, why did you even want me there? You practically embarrassed my parents when you had to explain why I wasn't at the funeral. There was silence for a moment, and then I heard Anna's voice on the other end of the line, sharp and unforgiving. You're a worthless piece of garbage, Simon. My parents nearly died of embarrassment when they had to tell the Reverend why you didn't come. I hope you rot just like Tracy. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Now you're starting to get it, Anna? That's exactly how I felt when I caught your saint of a sister with her lover in my bed. I guess you're finally seeing things from my side. As I hung up, I knew there was one more call I needed to make, one that was going to be just as unpleasant. Tracy had always handled all of our insurance needs. It made sense, she was the professional after all. We always discussed the policies together, but in the end, I let her make the final decisions. One of those decisions was a $1 million life insurance policy on each of us, with a double indemnity clause for accidental death before age 45. That meant I was about to receive a $2 million payout. But when I spoke to the insurance agent, he dropped a bombshell I wasn't expecting. There's one other thing, he said cautiously. Derek's office contacted us. They're trying to figure out who your wife was to him. Nobody there seems to know, or if they do, they're not saying anything. My heart pounded as I tried to process what he was telling me. What do you mean? You're saying his co-workers didn't even know about her? That's right, the agent confirmed. Nobody in Derek's office seems to know who this woman was, or if they do, they're keeping it to themselves. Later that day, I found myself sitting in a coffee shop, trying to wrap my head around everything. That's when a woman approached me, someone I didn't recognize. She was strikingly beautiful, with sharp features and piercing blue eyes. Mr. Tillerson? She asked, her voice both curious and cautious. Yeah, that's me, I replied, taking a deep gulp of coffee to steady myself. She hesitated, then spoke softly. What was your wife to my husband? I looked at her, trying to find the right words. How do you tell someone their husband died cheating on his wife, especially when that wife was yours? I dropped my gaze to the table, suddenly finding the Starbucks logo on my cup way more interesting than the conversation. That bad, huh? The woman said softly. Please, Mr. Tillerson, I deserve to know the truth. I took a deep breath and told her everything, from the moment I walked in on Megan and Derek to the whirlwind that followed. As I spoke, I could see her expression shift from shock to disbelief, and finally to something that looked like heartbreak. Once I was done, she just sat there, eyes glistening, clearly trying to process it all. Thank you for being honest, she whispered. I couldn't help but feel a wave of guilt for having to be the one to break it to her. After she left, I sat there for a while, just lost in thought. My mind was a mess of emotions, anger, sadness, and something else I couldn't quite place. To distract myself, I looked around the cafe. My eyes landed on a small bookshelf in the corner, filled with a mix of fiction and nonfiction titles. One book caught my attention, Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Seeing it stirred something in me. In school, I'd always been good at abstract thinking. My teachers used to say I had a knack for taking an idea, twisting it around in my mind, and seeing it from different angles. Even before the days of internet hyperlinks, I'd often let my thoughts wander down odd, interconnected paths. My friends never really got it. They'd call me spacey or absent-minded, but it worked for me. That book, and the idea of obsession and vengeance it carried, got me thinking. Why not take everything I'd been through and turn it into something creative, something that could help me make sense of it all? So I started writing. It wasn't easy at first, but it became cathartic. I poured all my feelings into the story, my pain, my anger, my frustration. I didn't hold back. To my surprise, a small publishing company actually picked it up. They did a limited print run at first, but the response was better than expected, and they quickly did 2 more. They even asked me to write another book, offering double the pay. I decided to go for it. This time it was a murder mystery, and yes, I made sure the Derek character was the victim, while the Megan character ended up getting caught and locked up. Finishing that book gave me a strange sense of closure, and seeing it sell well felt like validation, like people understood my anger and frustration. Eventually, another publishing company showed interest too. Success had its price though. Most people were polite, even supportive, but every now and then, someone would show up just to let me know they weren't impressed. I learned to shrug it off. I wasn't particularly impressed with myself either, but I didn't need to take rudeness from anyone. One Friday evening, I was back at my usual bar, the same one where the state trooper had first broken the news of Megan's death. I was sitting at my favorite spot, sharing some quality time with my old pal Jack Daniels. That's when I noticed someone at the far end of the bar watching me. It took me a minute to place her, but then it clicked. Ellie Biggs. Derek Biggs' widow. The last time I'd seen her was during the settlement signing when the trucking company cut us checks as compensation for the accident that killed our cheating spouses. Back then I'd confirmed to her that yes, her husband had been unfaithful with my wife. I gave her a polite nod. "I do remember you, Mrs. Biggs," I said, giving a small smile. "It took me a minute, but I got there. You're looking well, if you don't mind me saying." She smiled back, a little hesitantly, and made her way over to sit next to me. "It's been a while," she said. "Yeah," I agreed, trying to gauge her mood. "How've you been holding up?" "I had my settlement money, plus a sizable payout from the insurance. Maybe that made it easier for me to keep going, writing, living, finding a way to move forward. I figured I'd keep doing it as long as it felt good, and for now it seemed to be working." That night, Ellie and I, along with a couple of friends who had joined us, moved to a table in the back of the bar. I ordered a few snack trays to share, and we spent the evening talking and laughing. Hours slipped by without me even noticing, and before we knew it, midnight had rolled around. The ladies eventually said they needed to head out, and as they gathered their things, I couldn't help but smile. "I honestly can't remember the last time I had a night this nice," I admitted. "Can we do it again sometime?" Ellie gave me a soft smile. "How about next Friday night?" I suggested, a bit more confidently. "We'll start off with the two prettiest women in the place." Ellie blushed, her cheeks turning a deep shade of red. Then she looked at me seriously, her eyes searching mine. "Can I tell you something?" she asked, almost nervously. "Promise you won't get mad at me?" I nodded, unsure of what was coming. "I hated your guts that day at the lawyer's office," she admitted, scrunching up her face a little, clearly embarrassed. "After we signed the settlement papers, I walked out of there furious. I knew logically that you weren't responsible for Derek cheating on me with Tracy, but in my mind, it just felt like you knew the truth long before I did. It put you ahead of me, and I resented that. I didn't handle it well." I let her words sink in. Made sense, really. I couldn't blame her for feeling that way, given how blindsided she had been. "I get it," I said honestly. "I didn't exactly handle it gracefully myself. For a long time, I was stuck in this weird fantasy world where I kept punishing Tracy and Derek in every story I wrote. It made me feel better at the time, but I wasn't really living, I was just existing. It took me a while to realize that." We fell into a comfortable silence, just sitting there at the table, lost in our thoughts. I stared at nothing, barely aware of my surroundings, until I suddenly felt a jolt of electricity shoot through me. I quickly realized why. It wasn't my imagination. Ellie's lips were on mine, soft but insistent, and her tongue slipped gently into my mouth. I kissed her back without a second thought, the warmth spreading through me like a fire I hadn't felt in a long time. That night turned out to be the beginning of something real. It wasn't long before Ellie and I found ourselves spending more and more time together, letting go of the pain of the past bit by bit. About a year later, after making sure we had both truly moved on from our personal issues, we tied the knot. We built a big new house out in the country, complete with 5 bedrooms, one for us and one for each of the 4 kids we planned to have. We even included a guest suite so we could host family and friends anytime. Eventually, I started writing about more than just the old betrayal stories. My books became more varied. Crime dramas, thrillers, even a few heartfelt romances. It was liberating, like I'd finally found my voice again without constantly dragging Tracy and Derek's ghosts along for the ride. One afternoon, while sitting on the porch of our new house, Ellie mentioned something about a work transfer. "Why a transfer?" I asked, immediately curious. As soon as the words left my mouth, I realized what she meant. She had mentioned the company's expansion plans a while back, and I hadn't given it much thought. "The board wants to relocate some employees to help oversee the new branch's development," she explained. I smiled, realizing how far we'd come. Life was moving on, new opportunities, new dreams, and a future that didn't revolve around past betrayals. Ellie and I had built something stronger together, and I finally felt like I was living again, really living. I understood how work transfers typically went, but they usually didn't force married employees to move without at least getting their consent. Amy hadn't asked for a transfer, and I suggested she just decline it. But then she explained that it came with a promotion she'd been working toward for a long time. That put me in a tough spot. On one hand, I didn't want to risk our marriage falling apart by pushing her to stay. On the other hand, the idea of her moving so far away didn't sit right with me. In the end, it felt like the lesser of two evils was to let her go. I didn't like it, but if saving our relationship meant supporting her career, it seemed like the logical choice. Looking back, I'm not entirely sure I'd make the same decision if I were faced with it again. That night, Amy kept thanking me for being so understanding, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been manipulated. It was like she had carefully maneuvered me into making a decision that suited her more than it did us. Despite my reservations, I stayed focused on my own work. I had a big project going on, a business deal that, if successful, would mean a lot for our future. I wanted to surprise her with the news, so I kept it to myself, trying to stay as focused as possible. We didn't call each other much during that time, which was unusual for us. It ended up being the longest we'd ever gone without talking on the phone. We exchanged quick texts here and there, but we were both too busy for any meaningful conversations. The other day, though, a mutual friend threw something in my face that really bothered me. They accused me of being cold and manipulative because of how things had played out with Amy. In their opinion, I was the one who had pushed her away, but from where I stood, I didn't see it that way at all. I thought I was being supportive, doing what I could to help her succeed. Eventually, I decided to surprise Amy with a visit. I hadn't seen her in months, and I wanted to show her that despite everything, I still cared. I showed up at her office to see if she was around, but the receptionist looked confused when I asked for Amy. "She's married?" the receptionist asked, clearly surprised. I didn't push for details. I knew Amy liked to keep her personal life private, and I didn't want to make things awkward. After that, I made my way to her apartment, climbing 4 flights of stairs with a bouquet of flowers tucked behind my back. Just as I raised my hand to knock, I heard it, her moaning, followed by a man's voice urging her to keep going. My heart sank. It hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt anger boiling up inside me. It only took 5.5 months for her to move on, or rather, to cheat on me. I wanted to kick the door in and confront them right there, but I forced myself to stay rational. I wasn't about to make a scene, even though every part of me felt like screaming. I turned around and left, my thoughts racing. I couldn't get the image out of my head, Amy and this guy, completely oblivious to the pain they were causing. The rage was so intense I almost couldn't think straight. Later, when I finally got the nerve to confront her, she had the audacity to make unreasonable requests, as if she expected me to just move on without any anger or hurt. I couldn't believe it. She wanted me to stay calm, be understanding, and let her explain. But what was left to explain? The truth was staring me in the face. I didn't have the energy to argue with her anymore. I just couldn't see a way to make sense of any of it. All I knew was that my world had changed in an instant, and I didn't know how to put the pieces back together. After everything went down, Amy said she'd hand in her resignation when she dropped off the signed divorce papers. Still, I wasn't about to let her walk away without consequences. I sent the video I had taken to her parents, not out of spite but because I felt they deserved to know the truth about the daughter they had raised. Some people commented afterward, saying that it seemed like Amy had been checked out of the relationship long before she took that job. They speculated that she had probably wanted the transfer for a while and had been cheating on me for longer than I realized. In hindsight, it made sense. She had manipulated me into accepting the move under the guise of career advancement, all while planning her exit. When she came by to drop off the papers, she looked terrible, puffy, bloodshot eyes that could have been from crying or just dealing with whatever mess she was in. Either way, I wasn't too concerned. She was already an emotional wreck, and I had bigger things to think about, like the guy she cheated on me with, Josh. When I let her in, she seemed to think I was reconsidering the divorce because she immediately started rattling off excuses and explanations. She claimed she never thought I'd actually go through with it. Then she started whining about how she'd already lost her parents' respect and how I had punished her enough. I just stood there letting her ramble, not saying much. Then my focus shifted to something unexpected. Sunny. Sunny was Josh's wife, and when I first approached her to talk about what happened, I didn't know what to expect. I thought she'd be furious or maybe completely dismissive, but instead she turned out to be incredibly kind and genuine. We started talking more, and over time, we developed a surprisingly close friendship. Funny enough, I noticed that Josh started spending less time around her, probably because he was busy trying to fix his own mess after losing his job. Sunny confided in me one evening, sharing that her marriage had been rocky even before all this. Apparently, Josh had been neglecting her for months, barely paying her any attention. She had no idea I already knew what was going on between him and Amy, but her openness made me realize I couldn't keep this from her any longer. I took a deep breath and told her everything, showing her the proof. She didn't cry or yell. Instead, she just sat there in stunned silence, processing the betrayal. It was like watching someone's entire world fall apart. Once the reality hit, though, her face hardened with determination. "Thank you for telling me," she whispered. "I needed to know." For me, the betrayal wasn't just about Amy breaking our vows, it was the way she did it. We had stood together in front of friends, family, and God, committing ourselves to each other. And all of that was shattered by nothing more than fleeting lust. I couldn't help but wonder if she had convinced herself it was love. Maybe that made it easier for her to justify. I kept tormenting myself with questions. Why did it happen? Could it have been my fault for not being there enough? But then I'd shake my head and remind myself that I hadn't left her alone for long stretches. I wasn't some soldier deployed for months on end. I worked a regular job and came home every night. The truth was she chose to betray me. There was one moment when I couldn't help but laugh at my own thoughts. In a weird attempt to justify what had happened, my brain conjured up this ridiculous scenario where I was off on covert missions with Navy SEALs, leaving her feeling abandoned. But then reality hit me again. No, I wasn't in the military. The only SEALs I knew were the ones sunbathing down by the harbor. It was absurd. A few days later, while cleaning out some old things, I found a picture of us from a trip we took a few years back. On the back she had written, "What she didn't do for me." That hit me harder than I expected. Was that what it all came down to? Some unmet need that she didn't know how to communicate? Or was it just plain selfishness? I didn't have an answer, but one thing was clear. I couldn't let myself get dragged back into that toxic cycle of self-blame. I took a deep breath and walked out onto the porch, letting the fresh air clear my head. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could choose how to move forward. And that's exactly what I plan to do. Before I say anything else, I just want to make one thing clear. I'm not sharing these pictures to hurt you. I'm doing it to remove any lingering doubt. People keep asking me if I'm sure about filing for divorce, if maybe I'm overreacting, or if we should just go to counseling and work things out. Some say she's probably sorry and that it won't happen again. They think maybe I'm making a mistake or that I should at least hear her out. Even her mom, who I've always loved like she was my own mother, hasn't tried to change my mind. On the other hand, her dad, whom I've always respected but never truly warmed up to, has been trying to reason with me, saying I might regret it if I go through with the divorce. He thinks I should at least consider giving her a second chance. But here's the thing, I've made my decision. I told Amy that it's over. I've moved out, taken the things I needed, and left the rest behind. Whatever's left is hers. I don't want explanations. I don't want her telling me why it happened or begging for a second chance. I don't care about promises that it won't happen again. I'm done. All communication from now on will go through my lawyer. I don't plan to speak to her again, and I made that perfectly clear. When I told her this, I could see the mixture of shock and desperation on her face. "Maybe you're relieved that I found out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Now you and your lover can be together without having to sneak around. Whatever the case, it's over between us. Go ahead, Amy. Live your life. Just leave me alone." After that confrontation, Amy left the office in tears, visibly shaken. One of her coworkers later told me that the entire office was on edge after she stormed out. Apparently, even Josh looked like he was about to fall apart. As the director passed by his desk, he muttered something about how everything had gone sideways ever since this whole mess came to light. Josh's hands were trembling as he pressed a button on his phone, his mind spinning with the fallout of his choices. What had started as a secret fling had quickly spiraled into something much more destructive than he had ever intended. At first, it was just supposed to be fun, something hidden from everyone else. But as their feelings deepened, they made promises to each other, promises that their spouses would never find out. Now, with everything crashing down around him, reality finally hit hard. He suddenly remembered Sunny, his wife, and a wave of panic washed over him. "Oh my God, Sunny," he blurted out, grabbing his phone. He frantically dialed her number, praying she'd pick up. When the call connected, he could hear her breathing on the other end, shaky and uneven. "Sunny?" he said cautiously. For a moment, there was only the sound of muffled crying. Then her voice came through, so quiet he barely recognized it. "Josh, what are we going to do?" she whispered, her words almost drowned out by a soft sob. "He's my whole life. We were planning to start a family next year." Josh clenched his jaw, guilt twisting his stomach into knots. He didn't know how to respond. Everything had gotten so out of control, and now it was clear that the damage was far worse than he had anticipated. He thought he could keep his affair with Amy compartmentalized, something separate from his life with Sunny. But now he realized how deeply he had hurt her, and how impossible it was to put the pieces back together. For the first time, it dawned on him just how much he had lost, how much both he and Amy had lost, by choosing deceit over honesty. "I can't bear to lose him. I just can't," Amy whispered, her voice trembling as she tried to hold back tears. For what felt like the 20th time that day, Josh was overwhelmed with a deep, crushing sadness. "What have we done?" he muttered, more to himself than to Amy. Amy sniffled, wiping her eyes. "I feel the same way about Sunny," Josh admitted. "But honestly, Amy, I don't see a way out of this. We've destroyed everything." In the aftermath of the scandal, things moved slowly. Legal proceedings dragged on, and although the judge expressed doubt about issuing an arrest warrant, Josh still had to serve weekends in jail, being released on Sunday nights so he could attend work. The whole ordeal was grueling, but it was clear that reality was finally sinking in for both of them. At one point, Amy suggested they try counseling, but after a few sessions she gave up. It became clear that she wasn't really committed to putting in the effort, and eventually she canceled the appointments, admitting defeat. The divorce itself took nearly a year to finalize, with Amy still holding on to a sliver of hope that maybe I would change my mind. But that hope was extinguished for good when Amy's mother came across an announcement in the paper. I was getting remarried and the wedding was just around the corner. When Amy saw it, the last bit of hope she'd been clinging to crumbled. On the day of my wedding, Amy was a mess, emotionally drained and unable to come to terms with the finality of it all. In a strange attempt to cope, she decided to make my favorite dinner, as if recreating old habits could somehow make her feel closer to the life she'd lost. As for Josh and Sunny, their story took a different turn. After about 15 months of separation, they managed to find a way back to each other. But it wasn't easy. Sunny insisted on counseling, both individually and as a couple. She also made sure they established a strict prenuptial agreement, clearly outlining what would happen if he ever betrayed her again. Josh apologized so often that eventually, Sunny's patience ran thin. "Enough," she snapped one day after yet another remorseful speech. "If you apologize one more time, I swear I'm leaving for good. I get it, you messed up. You're sorry. Now either put in the work to fix this or stop wasting my time." Those words seemed to jolt Josh out of his guilt spiral. He realized that wallowing wasn't helping anyone and that he needed to take real, consistent action to prove he had changed. From that point on, he made a genuine effort to rebuild their relationship. He became more attentive, rarely leaving Sunny's side unless it was necessary, and he poured his energy into becoming a better husband and, eventually, a devoted family man. In a way, the experience transformed him. He no longer took his marriage for granted, and Sunny, although cautious, began to trust him again. They worked through their issues one step at a time, and slowly the pieces of their life together started to fall back into place. As for me, I had moved on. Starting fresh wasn't easy, but finding love again reminded me that life could go on, that happiness was still possible after betrayal. On my wedding day, as I looked at the woman by my side, the one who loved me genuinely and without reservations, I knew that I had made the right choice to let go of the past and embrace a new beginning.